So good morning. Really, I do want to begin by thanking you for coming out to Worth U. And really, more importantly than coming out, the fact that by your presence, you demonstrate that you're a leader in our school district, that you want to invest in your own learning, and more importantly, you want to help all of our kids learn and succeed. So that's the goal of today, is for us all to develop a little bit together and to dig into this multi-tiered system of supports. So as I start, I have a confession to make. I like to go to Vegas. Okay, I want you to know that. So here's what, I don't drink, I don't gamble a lot. Now that's a relative term, right? But I don't gamble a lot. But I really like Vegas. I like the lights, I like to people watch, I like the food, I like the shows, I like the dry air, I like the mountains in the distance. So it's a place that we like to go. Now, if you're picturing my Vegas trips as like The Hangover, you have the wrong picture. The movie that you need to be thinking about is called Last Vegas. Now, you probably didn't see Last Vegas, but most people called Last Vegas The Hangover for old people, right? So that's a little more like our Vegas trip. So a few years back, we were in Vegas, and my wife and I, we wanted to see a show. And so at the time, Guns N' Roses was playing at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino, and I had visions of seeing Axl Rose and Slash play Paradise City in a venue called The Joint. Like, I thought, this is going to be awesome. Now, you may know the phrase, happy wife, happy life. So I didn't get to see Guns N' Roses. So we instead went to one of the Cirque du Soleil shows that are all over Vegas, right? And so there's 5 or 6 of them that are in Vegas. There's a couple that are in Reno, Nevada. So these are really popular shows. And so we, with thousands of other people, joined in an arena/circus tent to watch these acrobats go through this show. And really, I will tell you, having seen the show, it was fairly amazing. Like the theater, the vast panorama of the show, the skill that these acrobats have, really there's a reason these are popular shows. So we were in Vegas again just recently, and we saw the same show for a second time. Now, the first time we saw this show, we were like 30 rows up. And so we could see, again, just the whole theater in front of us, and the panorama, and the scenes, and just the whole thing. The second time we saw this show, we were like in the second row. And so, I mean, literally, we were like feet from the stage. You could reach out and almost touch it. You could see, the expressions on the acrobat's face. You could see the sweat. You don't want to see that, but you could see the sweat dripping down from the acrobats. It was fascinating to be sitting in this second row. So we've seen the show twice, and we're walking back to our hotel, and we're having this conversation about, what'd you think? Like, which of the shows did you like? And we had both wanted to see certain parts of the show again that we'd seen the first time. And we agreed that we've seen the show twice, but they were from totally different perspectives. Totally different. Haven't been able to. And we enjoyed them both. When we sat back, you could see the whole thing unfold. When we sat up close, you could really see the detail that the performers put into their work. It was really remarkable. And so I felt like there were some parallels to seeing something twice in our work with MTSS. To provide that as a different example, it's often like when I see a movie or I read a book, the first time through, I think I've got it. Or as much as my brain is going to tackle something the first time through. But if I read the book a second time, or if I see the movie a second time, you often pick up things that you didn't pick up the first time. Especially if you enjoy watching comedy movies, right? Sometimes it's that second, third, or fourth time through something where you pick up small details that really become the best parts of that process. In our work with kids, we often don't have an opportunity to consider an important challenge or situation a second time before we make a decision or before we have to choose a course of action. But one of the things that we should do is we should always endeavor to stand back and look at something from a balcony view to gain a perspective. And then we should always endeavor to look really closely at something and figure out the fine details. Because when we do that, we have an opportunity to really improve our understanding of something. So when we see this show twice, it allows me to see things from a totally different perspective. And sometimes seeing things differently can make all the difference. Our major part of our MTSS journey is striving to see a problem or a challenge from a different perspective. So we're going to show a little video here that shows us a little bit about seeing things from a different perspective.
Location, location, location. Brought to you by the Conscious Leadership Group. Find them on the web at www.conscious.is. Animation by Graham Franks. www.grahamfranks.com. One question that conscious leaders ask themselves over and over is, where am I? To support leaders in locating themselves as they ask the question, where am I? We offer this tool, a line, a simple black line. At any moment, all leaders and all people are either above the line or below the line. Our location describes how we're being with what is occurring in our life right now. If we are above the line, we are open, curious, and committed to learning. If we are below the line, we are closed, defensive, and committed to being right. Stop right now and simply ask yourself, where am I? In this now moment, am I above the line or below the line? Typically, when people are below the line, they believe certain things about the world. For example, they believe there is not enough. It could be that there's not enough money, or time, or space, or energy, or love. People below the line also believe that their story about the situation is right. People below the line also believe that there is a threat out there. Something or someone is threatening their desire for approval, control, or security. And people below the line see the situation as serious. The deeper below the line they are, the more serious things look. People below the line tend to behave certain ways as well. They tend to cling to an opinion, find fault and blame, gossip, explain, rationalize and justify, get overwhelmed, and avoid conflict or pursue conflict for the sake of winning. When people are above the line, they believe that learning and growing are more important than being right. They believe that all people and circumstances are their allies, here for their growth. They believe that from a distance, almost everything is funny. People above the line live in curiosity, listen deeply, speak unarguably, question all their beliefs, and live a life of play. Now, knowing what you know about being above or below the line, where are you? One thing to know as you consider this question. We are hardwired to go below the line. Literally, our brain is programmed to perceive threat, and when it does, a chemical cocktail courses through our veins, and we go below the line. This reaction was designed to help us survive in the presence of a real threat to our physical survival. An issue for modern-day leaders is that often our brains can't tell the difference between a threat to our physical survival and a threat to our ego or identity. We react and get defensive when we experience a threat to our ego. So in many ways, being below the line is natural and normal. But when we are below the line, we're not in a state, literally brain state, of high creativity, collaboration, innovation, and relational connection. We're simply trying to survive. Leaders today can't thrive if they're in survival mode. So the first activity of conscious leadership is location, location, location. In this now moment, where am I? Telling ourselves and others the truth about our current location begins the great conversation.
So as we dig into MTSS today, how do we see things differently? And then the three words that were in that video, open, three phrases, open, curious, and committed to learning. I want those three, open, curious, and committed to learning. As we talk through MTSS this morning, be thinking about, am I open? Am I curious? Am I really committed to learning? So I have some promises today. My hope is that I will help you understand the key concepts of an MTSS, a multi-tier system of supports. Our hope is that you will consider your role in an MTSS system, and that we want to consider how we will share this out with our colleagues. Right? So as we move forward from our day of learning, how will we help those who aren't here with us learn more about MTSS? So we have this journey of MTSS in Worthington, and about 10 years ago, I was a principal in another school district. We were actively working on IAT, and we've all been through the IAT process. So a student might be struggling with something, a classroom teacher knew that they needed help, and they wanted to go through an IAT process. They would begin by filling out this massive packet of materials, right? Like 30 pages of data and all the contacts that they made with the parent and all the interventions that they tried. And that packet had to be filled out. It had to be complete before we would schedule a meeting. Like there was no ifs, ands, or buts. The packet had to be complete. And then we would eventually schedule a meeting. The meeting was usually before school, and I would be there as the principal, and our school psychologist would be there, and the parent would be there, and the teacher would be there. We had a literacy coach. The literacy coach would be there, and maybe another grade level teacher would be at the IAT meeting. And we'd usually begin as a school district by sharing, unfortunately, all of the things that the student was struggling with. And we would just begin rolling, and we'd be going through this. And as the principal, I would recognize at some point that the parent was tearing up and usually crying. Because how hard is it to hear about all the things that your child is not doing right? And so I felt like as the leader of the school, I had to fix this. Like we couldn't just keep piling on with the parent. And so I would jump into the situation and we would flip it. And then we would, the parent would all of a sudden begin talking about all the things that the teacher was doing wrong. And then the teacher would begin to tear up in the meeting. And so now we had like this mass chaos, and we would run out of time. And we'd be like saved by the bell because we were before school, and so we would hastily agree to some sort of intervention that we would try for the next 3 weeks, and then we would all scramble and avoid each other's phone calls for the next 3 weeks. Like that was IAT when I led it. That wasn't the best system, but that was IAT when I led it. It was a dirty word. Now here's the thing. Everybody wanted to do the right thing. Everybody in the room cared. Nobody really knew what to do, and the outcome of our IAT was often special education or bust. That's just where it was. Several years ago, I moved to Worthington Schools, and Jennifer Ween, who was our chief academic officer at the time, and Vicki Hartley, who was our coordinator of professional development, they were talking a lot about moving to something called RTI. So they sat me down and they explained that we needed to move from an IAT model to an RTI model. They showed me the RTI pyramid. They explained Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. They said things like, this is not a special education initiative, and 80% of our students should see success with good classroom instruction in Tier 1. Some of our students would need specific interventions in Tier 2. A few of our students would need specific interventions in Tier 3. In typical Worthington fashion, we decided we had to Worthingtonize the RTI pyramid, and so like Top Gun, we inverted it. It was really awesome. So then a few years ago, Kelly Wegley is in her current role as our coordinator of academic achievement, and Jennifer was still our chief academic officer, and we began talking about moving from RTI to MTSS. I listened, but honestly what I was thinking was, like seriously? Like RTI or IAT to RTI to MTSS? Do we really need another thing? I mean, MTSS sounded kind of cool, multi-tier system of supports, but we already had this really cool inverted pyramid in Worthington. Do we need another shift? Before I knew it, Margaret Searle was speaking at WorthU as our keynote last year, doing a great job, by the way, if she's in the room. So Margaret is here, so now I'm terrified that Margaret's here when we talk about MTSS. So Margaret was here, and then we had MTSS teams, and I was in my office as superintendent, secretly Googling, what is MTSS? All right, so MTSS in Worthington is the foundation of our continuous improvement plan. Now, I don't expect that you can read everything that's on this slide, and you don't need to because I know you have it memorized, right? So you should be in good shape there. So you're well versed in our Worthington plan for continuous improvement. We have these 4 focus areas that really, I hope you don't know every word of our 4 focus areas, but I do hope you know what our 4 focus areas are. So all teachers, number 1, all teachers will create a culture of empathy and support that scaffolds all students' academic, social, and emotional success. All teachers will use informational text in all content areas and at all levels so that students read to learn and extrapolate information that extends learning. All teachers will implement instruction that provides all students with opportunities to make their thinking visible through writing in all content areas and at all levels. And all teachers will implement instruction that reflects their understanding of depth of knowledge such that all students exhibit deeper levels of critical thinking. So in some phraseology, right, I know that you know those 4 focus areas. And I hope that everybody in our district does. So in Worthington, we created this visual representation of our focus strategies as a house. Now, it's not the best looking house, right? But it's symbolic, yet really important. The foundation of our house, the foundation of Worthington schools, is creating this culture of empathy and support that scaffolds all of our students' academic, social, and emotional success. This serves at the foundation of what we do. And then the red circle in the center of our foundation is where we've placed MTSS. So I was talking the other day to my friend Chris, who lives out in California. Chris is an FBI agent, and Chris said to me on the phone, I can't lift my arms today. So I, of course, laughed at him, made fun of him a little bit for being old. Now, by the way, we're the same age. Chris and I met when we were 18 years old. He had a sweet, and I mean sweet mullet at the time, and he had a key to our college weight room. He had stereo speakers that were as big as my college dorm room windows, and they played only Guns N' Roses. So Chris and I have been friends now for 25 years, and Chris explained that he and some friends of his, some volunteer friends, spent the vast majority of the last several days building a patio in his backyard. He claims that so far some measure of his friend group has been to Home Depot 5 different times throughout the weekend. And he says they've unloaded over 100 bags of various kinds of sand and gravel and dug up more shovelfuls of dirt than he could remember. Now, without getting into too many of the technical details about the build of the patio, and frankly, I don't know enough to get into the technical details of the build of the patio, so you'll have to trust as we go. But they had to build a retaining wall around the area so the patio would account for the changing elevation in Chris's backyard. So in regular terms, they had to build an enormous hole, or dig an enormous hole in his backyard so they could refill that hole. And if you add up the amount of time that they had spent on this project, you get roughly 27 hours. Now they say they spent 24 of those 27 hours on the foundation. Only the last 3 hours of the work were actually spent on the visible portion of the patio. Fascinating, right? To spend so much time on what's beneath the surface compared to so little time on what's actually visible. So given that ratio of time, I have a couple of reflections this morning that relate to our work in Worthington schools. First, and this is why our visual representation is important, strength and stability lie in the foundation. Like, you can have the most beautiful paving stone on a patio or the most eye-catching paint color, but in the end, they really don't mean anything if you don't put the right amount of time into the foundation. In Chris's project, for example, they had to dig down approximately 18 inches in order to build the retaining wall so that not only the wall, but the surface of the patio would have the right shape, definition, and strength when they were all done. So seeing this principle lived out in front of me in a physical way made me think of the amount of time we're tempted to allocate to what? Sometimes we allocate a lot of our time to the most inconsequential of things. It's like focusing on the paint color of a patio while neglecting a crack in the foundation. We can't close our eyes to the greater issues that are in front of us. The second reflection that I had is most surface issues, most of the things that we actually see, are really foundation issues. So they spent a lot of time on the foundation of this patio, a lot of time. Hopefully, they got it right. Now, I've known Chris long enough to say I wouldn't bet my house on that. But hopefully, they got it right. But someday, there's going to be a crack. There'll be some shifting, and sometimes when that happens, you can correct the issue with a surface level tweak. But if we really care about the stability of the structure, sometimes we have to really dig down and investigate the source of the crack. And that's going to mean some seriously hard work. It might even mean messing up the carefully crafted exterior and then putting it back together again. That's the way of building something. So in our school district, we're all building something today, whether we realize it or not. In that building, we cannot, we should not, we will not neglect the foundation of our work. MTSS sits in the middle of our foundation for a reason. We believe that we should build our school district on this culture of empathy and support, where we provide supports needed for all students across the curriculum so they can grow at higher and higher levels. So as we dig into this, what is MTSS? So MTSS is a coherent continuum of evidence-based system-wide practices to support a rapid response to academic and behavioral needs with frequent database monitoring for instructional decision-making to empower each student to achieve high standards like changing the world. Got it? So here's the truth. I've read that 30 times, maybe more. And when I first heard the definition of MTSS, and really when I read it to you today, I'm still left with, right, so what is MTSS? And then I have questions, like follow-up questions like, how exactly do we do MTSS? So in my mind, if RTI replaced IAT and MTSS replaced RTI, then there has to be a training that we could go to that would explain exactly how we do this new MTSS thing. My mind works like that. I'm very linear. If A, then B. Give me a roadmap and clear directions, and I can follow it anywhere. Guys, unfortunately, we choose to work with humans, right? And in a human profession, roadmaps rarely work with specific directions. The kids we teach, like each of us, are very, very different. What works with one student may help many other students, but it's possible that what works with one student may not work with another student. Thus, here's what I learned, and I think this may be like the most important thing I'm going to say this morning. So if you're tweeting right now, please put your phone down. I want you to listen to this part. Ready? MTSS is not a thing. It's not a specific process. MTSS is a way of thinking about how we work with our students. MTSS is a commitment we make to our students and their families that we will do whatever is necessary to help them learn and grow. We'll care for their social emotional needs. We'll build their executive functioning skills. We'll commit to meeting with our teammates to review student data and have a conversation about classroom instruction that may help us see a situation differently and change course. We'll coach others, and we'll ask questions without trying to solve the issue for our colleagues. MTSS is just a framework, or in the diagram, an umbrella, that pulls all of our work together. In truth, IAT didn't go away. And in MTSS, we still need an IAT process. RTI hasn't shifted. We did choose to uninvert our pyramid, by the way, so that part shifted. But good Tier 1 instruction is still critical for every student's success. And we've learned that we need strong Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions that are system-wide and standard across the school district. Our TBTs don't go away. They're the vehicle for collaborating. They're sometimes the vehicle for asking the 5 whys and for helping us change our practice. MTSS is the center of our district foundation because it helps pull our initiatives together and focus them to help every one of our students. So my simple definition for MTSS is this. MTSS is a commitment we make to students and families that we will constantly evaluate our practice and utilize our resources to do whatever necessary to help every one of our students learn and grow. It's not a thing. It's a commitment that we make. So part of MTSS is really investigating through this commitment that we make, what are our instructional practices? One of the things that we always say is that nothing is more important than the teacher in the classroom. So no pressure, because that's totally true. Nothing's more important. But again, one of this tenets of MTSS is that we're going to constantly evaluate what we're doing in the classroom and what our practices are that we impart with kids. So you're all familiar by now with John Hattie's research on effect size. And so in 2017, Hattie did an update called Visible Learning Plus. You can Google Visible Learning Plus if you haven't seen his update. It's fairly fascinating. And one of the things that you'll see in Hattie's research is almost everything we do does have some positive effect on student learning. Now, there are a few practices that actually have a negative impact on student learning. Retention is still listed as one of those practices that actually has a negative impact. But if you said to me, I've been doing it this way for 15 years and I know it works, the truth is, you're probably right. You're probably right. It probably does work. The question is, how much positive effect does it have? And if I was willing to investigate my own practice and dig into my work at a deeper level, if I was open to change, could I do something differently that would actually have a greater positive effect? So one of the analogies that Kelly often uses is about the medical world. And so many of you know, and I shared this at Convocation a year or two ago, that in 1985, my dad was swimming at Westerville Athletic Club and had a massive heart attack. So he was 40 years old and was in good physical condition. And so while swimming laps, he had this heart attack. And it was a blessing that it happened in the pool because the lifeguard was able to dive in, pull him out of the water, give him CPR until a squad arrived and really saved his life. Okay, so that was a positive. After his heart attack, he had to have triple bypass surgery back in 1985. And so in those days, when you had triple bypass surgery, you actually sawed the sternum in half, split it open to do the bypass surgery, and then also used a significant vein from Dad's leg. So 33 years later, Dad has a scar that goes from his belly button all the way to the base of his neck, and then from his groin all the way down to the base of his knee, right? But surgery was successful. And the truth is, it worked. And it would work in that exact same fashion today. Now the question is there a better way? And so doctors have determined today that for many patients, they can do a minimally invasive procedure instead of the traditional procedure where you have to saw the sternum in half. So in this new procedure, they actually make a 3-inch incision horizontally through the rib. Spread that part apart. They can see, they can do the surgery. Recovery for the minimally invasive procedure is like 10% of the time from the old procedure. And so far, the results for most people have been as effective. Now, if I have a choice, and there's a new and better and more effective way, would I accept doing it the old way? In medical terms, it's a no-brainer. Now, our classrooms have to be the same. So in MTSS, we commit to taking a hard look at our instructional practices, to collaborating openly and honestly with our teammates, with a goal of instituting practices that not just work, but provide the most benefit to all of our students. And Hattie's research provides a roadmap for that. Now, by the way, learning intentions and feedback still rate, as in Hattie's research in the 2017 update, as having the highest effect size of anything that teachers can implement. Now, we've called those in Worthington for years formative instructional practices. And sometimes we talk about learning targets. But Hattie's research tells us that if we want to help all of our students learn, being clear on what it is they need to learn and providing them feedback on their progress towards that learning is still the most important instructional practice. So I'm going to detour on this one for just a minute. I've told this story before, but you know that my academic career was not super stellar, right? I struggled. And school was difficult, and for sure, math and science were difficult. Like if Robin Brooks had not been my chemistry partner at Worthington High School, I'd still be in chemistry at Worthington High School. So when I was working on my doctorate, one of the classes that I not only had to pass, but really had to master the material was an advanced statistics class. Guys, I was scared to death. I knew I was unprepared for this class. I had taken, school finance classes in my master's work, but I hadn't really taken a math class since I was in math for elementary teachers too in my undergrad at Taylor University, right? And I'd never taken a statistics class. So, I had visions that this was it. Like this was the end of my doctoral program. I was going to wash out. They were going to see that I was an academic fraud. Like I was scared to death. But I was also determined. So I sat right in the front row the first night of class, and, sweat was pouring down the back of my neck. Like I felt bad for the people that were sitting behind me that actually knew math, right? And the professor opened class with words that I'll honestly never, ever forget. He said this. He said, "This is an advanced statistics class. And my expectation is that you've passed both a master's level and undergraduate statistics class before taking this class." I was like, So I almost passed out. I didn't want to admit, I didn't want to tell the truth, right? But here's the deal, like I'm just sitting there and I'm like, I'm totally screwed, right? Like this is worse than I thought it was going to be. So here's the thing, a funny thing happened. Dr. John Frost was simply the best teacher I have ever experienced, ever. No question. So every week when we would come to class, he would outline the 5 or 6 things that we were going to learn. Then he would give us practice problems on those specific things that we needed to learn. If we didn't understand one or more of those specific items that he had outlined to start class, he told us when we could come in during the week to get help from him on those items. The next week, we always began class with a review and a quiz on the specific learning targets from the week before. He made the path explicitly clear. For 15 weeks, I started every class by not understanding a single thing on the learning targets. But by working in class, by completing the homework that was perfectly aligned to those learning targets, for 15 straight weeks, going to see Dr. Frost for extra help, I actually learned the material. Here's the thing. Dr. Frost had never heard, I don't believe, of Hattie's research on learning targets, but by utilizing learning targets in constant feedback on our progress, I learned material that I didn't believe I could. And I'm convinced that this process will work for others. Our instructional practices matter. And in MTSS, we commit to collaborating openly and honestly with our TBT, with our teaching partners, with the goal of instituting practices that not just work, but provide the most impact, that have the greatest effect size for all of our students. So one of the things that we've been talking a lot about this year and through this MTSS process with Margaret is this concept about executive functioning, right? And we've learned that through IAT and then through our RTI process that classroom instruction and content is critically important, but it's not enough to help every student learn. In MTSS, we commit to helping our students with their executive functioning. So we know that the executive functions are a set of processes that all have to do with managing one's self and one's resources in order to achieve a goal. It's an umbrella term, right, for this neurologically based skills involving mental control and our own self-regulation. So if you were here last year, you heard Margaret speak on MTSS, and you've seen this slide about the brain. You know that the part of the brain that controls executive function is the prefrontal cortex. You'll also notice that in the final brain picture on the far right, that from when students begin school with us in Worthington to when they finish college, a significant change actually occurs in the brain. And so I think it's important that we recognize that, no matter what the age of our students are that we work with. So it's easy for us to say things like, why don't they know how to do these things? Or, shouldn't they already know how to do these things? And guys, sometimes that's a fair point. But the point of MTSS is determining what do we need to put in place as a school to help all students access the curriculum. Many, and we all know this, many of our students need help in learning how to self-regulate. They need help in learning to set goals, and they need help in learning to complete tasks. Many of our students are struggling with their social and emotional health. Together, as part of our commitment in MTSS, we commit to helping them with these issues. So it's tempting again to believe that if we do X, then Y will happen. What we know, again, from working with humans in this human profession is that almost in every area, executive functioning for certain, we're all, guys, all of us and all of our students are somewhere on a continuum. And we're all bringing ourselves to the table. And we all need to develop our own personal coping skills to manage ourselves. Whether it's executive functioning, social emotional learning, PBIS ideas that we put in place, we're trying to help our students become the best version of themselves. And that's critical. So one of the pictures that you've seen, I don't know if you can read it from where you are, but I find this cartoon poignant, more poignant in the winter than it is when it's 90 degrees outside. But as you can see, you know, the person is trying to shovel the stairs. And legitimately, you know, as I look at this, he's out there working hard, he's out there in the cold, he's out there shoveling the snow, he has positive intentions, and if he shovels the snow, it will help. Students will be able to go up the steps. But there's a student to the left, and they're in a wheelchair, and the student says, hey, could you please shovel the ramp? And he reminds them, if you shovel the ramp, all of us can get in. And so there was nothing wrong with shoveling the steps, right? But when we dig into it, and if we step back and we see it from a balcony perspective, you go, oh yeah, you know, if I did this instead of this, more of our students would benefit. But as humans, it's really hard for us to do that. It really is. And it's not intentional. There's no ill intent by the person out there actually working hard to shovel the steps, right? But at some point, they need to see things differently. And so that's part of what we want to do through MTSS. It's part of how we help our students with executive functioning and social emotional learning. Right? What can we put in place that will help all of our kids access the curriculum? Margaret's been talking a lot about this 5-step process. And so if you've been in training this year with Margaret, and many of you have, she's been helping our MTSS learn to utilize the 5-step process. So this process, as you know, was originally utilized by Toyota Manufacturing. And it's a way to drill down into root cause analysis. So the strength of the 5 whys lies in the repetition of the question. So this prevents us as people because we all start with assumptions and classic root cause problems, such as things like, well, we don't have enough time, or we don't have enough money, or we don't have enough manpower. And all of these things might actually be factors, legitimately, but by repeating the why question, we're forced to identify different causes that might be responsible for the problem. And here's the thing. As people, we're inclined to stop looking for the problem as soon as we've identified a cause. It's important, and this process drives us through it, it's important to remain alert and keep repeatedly asking the why question so the cause can be identified at different levels. So this problem-solving journey that we look at, it begins with creating a clear formulation of exactly what's going on. What is it that's going on? And then it relies on our openness to ask for help and to ask for to partner with a teammate who can act as a coach that will help us reflect and see things differently, right? Are we open to reflect and see things differently? It's impossible, guys, for any of us to work with a group of students and know intuitively exactly what to do with each student in each situation. All of us is going to need some help. In MTSS, one of our commitments is that we're going to work collaboratively with our colleagues in a process of discovery to find the root cause and set a goal to improve from there. And we commit to working on both sides of that. We commit to asking for help and letting somebody else coach us through this 5-step process. But we also commit to giving of ourselves and working as the coach for others through that 5-step process. Because we're open and we're curious and we're committed to helping all of our students learn. And so learning to go through that 5-step process is part of MTSS. So we have some really positive examples that are going on with teams that are trying to utilize this MTSS framework throughout our school district. And we're going to look at a few of those now. So we're going to start with Bluffview's BLT. So you're not going to be able to read all of this from where you are, but they start on the left and they talk about where did we used to be with IAT. And Bluffview was in a better place than I described in my journey with IAT, thankfully. But IAT was solely academic. It wasn't often as data-driven as we would like. It rarely was focused on student strengths. And that part's going to be critical if we're going to engage parents. And it was often focused on getting kids on the radar towards an IEP process, that special education or bust mindset. And then Bluffview says, where are we headed with MTSS? So based on their work, they're trying to consider the whole child, consider student strengths first as the building block, And guys, many of us in the room are parents. It's really helpful to hear those students' strengths first so that we can engage in the conversation with the school district. Teachers share critical data, they bring evidence, and it's an active conversation. It's an active conversation. So we're going to look at one of those conversations that Liberty had as soon as we get back to the slideshow, Kelly. All right, so hey, you're going to have to really listen on these two videos.
The big takeaway from the whole meeting for me was it's not a formula that we're just like plugging in each student into. It's more like using these tools and shifting them as is appropriate. Basically, every time he said something like whatever you think, I just wrote that down, and I feel like free to go with my best instinct. Because before it's like I want to do exactly what you said because I know you're being successful with it, but also like my student is different. You know, like you haven't met my student, so that might be different for me too. So it's very.
So let me just point out there that the one thing that jumps off, and I know it's hard to hear some of these videos, and of course we cut off the speaker, but it's not a formula. Like the one thing I heard them say in that conversation, their takeaway was, this isn't a formula. And I told you before, and it's really true, I'm totally wired to want a formula. If A, then B. MTSS is more of a framework and a commitment. Let's go with the second video.
And so, yeah,
I realized one really big thing. I just keep coming back to it. We are Angel.
Yes.
We are having the same issues with this that he has with schools. And I think, I keep hearing, what if this, what if this, what if we do it wrong, and our confidence and our willingness to take risks on this. And, we feel better with clarification and direction and goals and charts. And, I think we have to be really in tune with our kids that we're trying to help. That, there aren't going to be perfect answers, but we're in tune with what they need and we can put ourselves in that position. I think a lot of it will be very clear when we can really be in their shoes and think about what they need.
So I felt like in that clip, what was so powerful is just the recognition of, hey, we're all struggling just like the student. I think the student's name was Angel, the same way Angel is. And I think we have to be okay with that. Like we're in a profession, most of you got into education because you want to be fixers and helpers. And so it's really hard when we're not exactly sure what to do with something. Part of this commitment we make in MTSS is just being open to dig into a problem, to try to see it differently, right? And just understanding that, hey, yeah, we're dealing with the same things because we're all human and we're all on a continuum somewhere. So we're going to look at Worthingway next.
Coming off Worthingway is the fact that we often had conferences with families, and it was a little intimidating for our families. So we had a lot of discussion about how can we make it more comfortable and collaborative for our families. And around that time, we were also engaged in conversations with Margaret Sorrell in those meetings. And so as a building, we already had a process in place, so I think it just really helped our process become better. And so at Worthingway, we spent a lot of time before the meeting kind of prepping families and collaborating with families, having conversations about the need, what we're concerned about, why families are coming in. So families aren't coming into us blind.
And the idea was to identify the root cause before the meeting and then meet with the student ahead of time and really help brainstorm, help get them involved in the process and just make it a more positive experience. And then the parents came in also knowing what we were going to focus on. And everybody came with one idea for them, one idea for school, one idea for the student.
So we go around the table, and rather than anybody sharing any worries or concerns or negative things, we start with a positive for each of the teachers to share with the kid. That flips the whole meeting and makes it very positive, and the kids are often really surprised to hear that we have really good things to say. And then we come up with strategies, and everybody has the opportunity to write out strategies. We all make suggestions for a strategy that could happen at home, a strategy that the child could choose to do, and a strategy that teachers or the school is going to do to help the situation, or that we think will help the situation. And then the true power in this is that the teachers or the school people get to choose the strategy or strategies that we'll do at school. The kid gets to choose the strategy the kid is going to do. And that is so powerful, because when the kid chooses that, then they're much more likely to do it, as we all know. And then the parents get to choose what it is that they think that they can change or do differently at home.
I think the power has been the student involvement and the parent involvement by far. It's not about what we're going to do to the kid. I heard someone say that once, but what we're going to do for the kid. Gina said that. But it's remarkable the positive atmosphere that comes from the meetings, the collaboration that we have, the follow-up. It helps us build really strong relationships with our kids and our families.
So one of the things that Worthingway points out is that they're really working to try to make it more comfortable for a family. And they all, as you heard them talk, all start with that positive for a student, right? And that helps change that conversation where we're going. So I'm going to wrap up here, right? So where is our next step for the future? As you leave this morning and as you dig into the day, I want us to remember that MTSS is a commitment we make to students and families that we will constantly evaluate our practices and utilize our resources to do whatever is necessary to help them learn and grow. It's a framework for improvement that brings together IAT, RTI, social emotional learning, PBIS, TBTs, and our instructional practices. It's the foundation of our work in Worthington schools. So I began my teaching career outside of Fredericksburg, Virginia in 1995. I think back to that first class of 5th graders that I had at Potomac Elementary School. I mean, you need to know that I have this level of guilt that I carry around with me today about my lack of understanding of solid instructional practices. I think back specifically to a student named Sean. Sean was an overweight student, but he was incredibly affable. Like, he had this great smile, and he walked into school happy every day. Unfortunately, as a 5th grader, Sean couldn't read. And guys, I had no idea how to help him. I'd put him in groups with strong readers, and when we did social studies class, I'd let him pass and not read out loud. I knew he was struggling and that he needed, time needed help, but I didn't know what to do. And so I thought, well, I need to talk with his family. Like, if I tell them that he can't read, then this will fix the situation. And this was pre-internet, pre-email, pre-cell phone, like 1995. And so they had no home phone. So I drove to their house out in the country, and I'm practicing in my head as I'm driving. Like, first of all, I'm lost because there's no Google Maps, but I find the house, and I'm practicing what I'm going to say to Mom, and I'm pretty sure that, man, once I tell her, like, this is going to get fixed, because if I just tell Mom, right? And literally, I'm like 30 seconds out of my car, and I'm talking to Mom, and I realize, like, effort's not the issue. Mom's doing the best she can. Mom's doing the best she can. So I stayed and had a cup of iced tea and talked a little bit, and didn't leave there with a whole lot of help. And I talked to my teaching partners in 1995, and they were great teaching partners. But really, what we did at that point was we went through the book every day, and we did the corresponding workbook pages. And so I thought, as a new teacher, I was being really, really, really progressive, because I would keep Sean in from recess, and I would help him with his workbook pages, right? And so now you understand why I've got this level of guilt that hangs over me 23 years later about that work. And so in thinking about Hattie's research, I don't believe my instructional effect size was probably much over 0.1, right? But I am heartened, because I don't think I had a negative effect size that school year, right? So over the years of my career, we've come a long way in education. With the advent of IAT teams and structured intervention processes for students, there was a process for our teachers to get help. RTI pushed us further ahead, and we focused on Tier 1 instruction for all of our students, and we made certain that we had these Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports in place. And as we move to MTSS, we're attempting to incorporate the whole child back into our work and to provide all of our teachers with a process for collaboration that will begin to design instruction for all students and for students like Sean. Guys, will MTSS be the end-all and be-all? I don't believe so, right? I believe it's part of our evolution, and as we continue to learn more about teaching and learning and helping all students see success, I do believe that MTSS is worth our time. I believe it will help our students, and I do believe that we have the teachers and the administrators in place in Worthington to empower a community of learners who will change the world. So our goal for you today is to enjoy your day at WorthU. Enjoy your day with your colleagues. Be open, be curious, be committed to digging into instruction and our practice and seeing things differently so that we can help all of our students succeed. Thank you this morning. I'm going to let Kelly come up and tell you what to do next.